Justin Dilley and Eric Sharp. Hey!
I like the new intro music, Justin.
Yeah, that was you did a good job with that, Eric. You did a good job with that.
Our AI overlords helped out tremendously.
Yeah, I'm aware. I guess I need to ask you before we go any further, what are your rates if we're going to talk for a little bit?
Oh, for you get the friends and family discount, my friend.
I still need to know the rate.
Oh, I'll give you the half your lawyer's rate. How about that?
All right. End of show.
And scene. Welcome. It is Friday, April 3rd, episode 81 of the Multifamily
Episode
Weekend
81. I do. It is it's much like my shirt, which is a conversation piece. Your hat is also a conversation piece.
It is. And shout out to Joni Shoemaker of the Revenue Method. Thanks for sending this hat over to me. I love it. I saw it online. I commented. I had a hat box shipped to me shortly after.
That's pretty cool. Look at that. Look how things happen.
It's amazing how fast things happen.
Nobody sent me this. I had to just buy it myself. So
old friend. I like that.
Yeah, for musical theater folks will understand the reference. Yeah. How was the week?
Not too shabby. A lot of news stories. Some of them real, some of them not real.
Yeah, a lot of them this week actually not real. We participated in some of that, highlighting a few fake news stories. Out of the ones we shared, Eric, so what was one of your favorite?
Oh, I think Resi Rooter was interesting. Grady Newman announced that his company Resi was gonna, websites are going away, AI is taking over, therefore they're gonna go into maintenance. So he joked about swapping everything over into more of a maintenance level company.
Yeah, that was a good one. Zach Sloan with Opinion, following up on his pet grotto instead of rent grotto. Now rent grotto is part of Opinion. He is carrying on the tradition and had a great. It's essentially a new company. If you look on LinkedIn, Opinion. A lot of eyes there. But a lot of folks, joined in. Mike Whaling, Kelly Mahoney of Hill Point. It was nice to see some posts. What was the one that we shared that you thought we should reference? What's one of the?
I mean, my favorite one at this point is Mr. Atram. The cruise. The Norwegian cruise line. I think a lot of folks appreciated that one. It's almost believable.
Almost. Some of them are. My wife, I ran the list down, the headlines through my wife. Her favorite was the predictive complaint from Elise AI. The apologize to the resident before they even complain. Which is funny. So
it does remind me of the Minority Report a little bit, right?
Yeah. So there are probably real news stories that we have to tackle. What's top of the list for you? Anything, or should we just dive into the big headlines?
There's the occasional acquisition here and there. I don't think we're going to cover too many of those. There was a partnership that we'll talk about here shortly. Q2, start of Q2 basically is where I'm at.
Start of Q2. Well, start of Q2. This is not an April Fool's Day anything. BGO and Bell Partners. I mean, Bell Partners essentially was acquired by this organization, but they're running separately as Bell Partners will run the U.S. multifamily strategy under BGO. So,
yep. Yeah. Was it Bell is going to remain that independent brand, right? So Multifamily has definitely been in the news recently for sure on the political spectrum. Lots of focus has been hitting everything from, build to rent to fees to pricing algorithms. We've heard a lot of it over the last 2 years, and it's not really going away.
Yeah. Yeah. A couple news stories relating to some of the build to rent stuff, relating to a couple other things that's happening in the Midwest. We talked about last couple weeks. We thought we'd double click, do a deeper dive discussion on some of that. Jay Parsons actually took some of that Midwest data from apartment list, who sort of compared more volatile markets like Austin and San Francisco. It was kind of like, seeing what happened in those markets over a period of time and then comparing it to what was happening in Midwestern markets.
Yep. Yeah. Ultimately, the Midwest is just on this typical rise. The Midwest has been doing the classic train up, 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 whereas almost all the other markets have been kind of dip diving and dodging. And we'll talk about it a little bit later, but essentially, the predictability of multifamily is a challenge. And the Midwest is just proven the place to invest if you want predictable growth.
Right. It's that slow and steady growth that is, there's no giant spikes compared to these other markets. And that is sort of where it's like, where a lot of people, including Parsons, is saying, hey, investors, like this is the spot. If you're looking at like a stable, potentially predictable investment, these are the areas to go in because there's so many other factors. And, some of the study included things about like, in terms of like fires and pandemic and the economy and the job market. And there was a lot of things. Those didn't have as big of an impact on these Midwestern markets that were identified.
Yep. Well said. And Senator Warren, flipping back to our political spectrum here, Senator Warren's been really tackling build to rent. I think what we've seen right off the bat, so the Senate has passed their resolution for this bill, whereas it's sitting in the House. I think it's still in the committees. Already build to rent has stopped, like funding has stopped. Essentially, lending is just drying up left and right. They're scrutinizing everything because usually the hold period for build to rent is over 7 years. And what they're basically saying with this bill is that you're going to have to divest within 7 years, your holdings if you meet that threshold. So, this is, arguably, it's just going to eliminate about 50,000 homes. Build-to-rent homes have just stopped immediately. They're just no longer going to move forward with them before this bill is even passed. So we're already reducing housing from this bill that is meant to sort of punish or, go after folks who are building housing. I don't know if that's going to have them shift towards something else per se. It does depend on on the company, on the investors. But, right off the bat, we're seeing the negative effects of this bill before it's even gone through, just from the potential of it to clear.
Yeah. And if that sounds like familiar, it's because we talked about it on the show last week. It was a big theme coming out of NAA's Advocate. That's what the focus was on Capitol Hill from folks in the industry that were meeting with different congressional and leaders. It is a friction between the House and the Senate. It's very clear. It's like they're kind of fighting against this. Everyone agrees that there's a housing shortage, but they're trying to figure out the best way. Like whose fault is it? Who are you going to help solve it? And the idea of like large investors are the problem isn't finite enough or not clear enough on what that means. And so the data is a little wonky in terms of what that framework looks like. As we mentioned, last week, a lot of these institutions that are building build to rent are not the same ones that are like making housing unaffordable in a particular city. Like they're not buying up a whole bunch of single family homes and pricing people out so that they profit. They're actually they're buying up land. They are raising value, buying up land, and they're creating, what somebody, I think we talked about it last week as well, a horizontal apartment community, which is like just really one single layer of apartments that have yards that are single family. It is discouraging that it's there, but if there's more restrictions that are placed on it, then we're going to see people move away from it, and they're going to go build a whole bunch of apartments in the Midwest.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean,
maybe.
not BTR.
Yeah, not build to rent.
I mean,
for
that's
sure.
like,
I mean, it's a different asset class at the end of the day. You're gonna have different people who want to move into BTR, and that you need more. You need more land for that. Like, New York is not. New York proper, New York City is not building build to rent like that. They can't. They don't have the space, right? Yeah. You have to go into the outskirts more. The suburban areas to even tackle this. So this really affects something like 0.5% of the homes, by the way, at the end of the day. Like it's such a minuscule amount in the grand scheme of things. But, I think the message is clear from both, a united front on the multifamily side is, build to rent should not be under attack. This is going to just create more issues in our industry in general. So, I can appreciate Senator Warren going after credit card companies all day long, but I think this is going to be quite the negative effects for us, all of us.
Yeah, agreed.
All right. Well, speaking of tailwinds and headwinds,
were we though?
Were we? Headwinds. There are headwinds.
Headwinds for sure. Headwinds for sure. Yes.
Rich. Oh, let me get
Hughes. Rich Hughes
code up here. Yeah, Rich Hughes from Real Page put together some information talking about this recent decade of growth for multifamily. He's arguing that the last decade was driven by more wins, and we should not expect to see that in the future. So, obviously COVID was, that once in 100-year type situation. A lot of changes happened, including, in housing, right? The moratoriums on evictions, people jumping back into their parents' house, people moving from the city outward into suburban areas, right? Lots of changes occurred in terms of those, for those who were mobile, mobility was a big deal there. So, he's just basically saying demand for apartments is not going away, but we should expect slower and less forgiving growth, which kind of ties back into Jay Parson tapping into the Midwest, just being that strong, slow and steady train of growth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All true.
All right. Next up, we've got Tamala.
Some AI regulatory insights, right? A few of them? 6?
Yeah, so she tapped into 6 of them here. Actually, got to find my notes, which have the 6. Let me see here. Oh, I don't have my notes that have the 6. I'll read them off this side here. Yeah.
Well, yeah. And this is from Multifamily Next. So Tamala shared this. Multifamily Next, which includes her, but some other folks, they put all of this together and they delivered some clean regulations that kind of are popping up in different parts of our country.
And I think the reason why this article was spurred is because the government, the White House, just released their national AI policy framework. I'm still kind of digging through it. They announced it on March 20th. We didn't cover it last week. But, a lot of this, for example, is like, Colorado has just been one of these states that's been putting a lot of things in their crosshairs.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to create like a unified standard for AI regulation. So that's a big deal there. Pamela does talk about Colorado's landmark AI Act, but it's likely going to be getting rewritten. So a lot of things going on there. Look out for a June 30th deadline. And then HUD is proposed removing the disparate impact regulations. The real page settlement changes, right, for the algorithmic pricing rules. The DOJ, settling those rules. That's just been a big deal for us in the last year. And really the court approvals are still ongoing here in 2026. And then Texas and Illinois AI laws have now gone live. They went into effect in January earlier this year in Texas. For example, banning the use of zip codes as proxies for protected classes, or requiring mandatory notice when AI is used in hiring, scheduling, or workforce management. That's an interesting one. I can actually appreciate some of that there. And then Oregon has passed the nation's toughest chatbot law. So this is for anyone in the chatbot industry for multifamily, which it seems like there's lots of AI companies out there that are doing conversational AI and chatbots. And at the end of the day, Oregon is passing this law that says it's $1,000 per violation.
Yeah, and I think the biggest, the broader takeaway from all this, right, is that you have to stay on top of all this minutia in these laws, especially if you're trying to create, products in this space, or you're trying to leverage AI in your company, or you need to make sure that where your business is, who you're serving, all those things, that you're kind of aware of what's going on, because AI is not going away, and neither is AI legislation. So it will not be a set it and forget it. It will be a constantly evolving thing while we're still learning about the technology.
Yeah. All righty.
Number 3, PropTech Buzz had a little renewal and retention wheel that they dropped.
Ooh.
It just showed kind of a landscape, and folks do this a lot, like try to map out the ecosystem of something and like say, oh, this is where all the products are, and here's what these products do this and these products do that. And I looked at it briefly. It's basically right, but it's also not, because some of these products do more than that. It's sort of what these products are known for, and sort of in terms of retention, of renewal, all these factors that drive, basically revenue. So it's a nice breakdown and kind of cursory, piece. It highlights products that you might not have heard of. It highlights products that you have heard of. And there are some products that are missing. So it's definitely a great conversation starter. And they put that together and dropped it this week.
I'd love to be able to load it for us, but their site's a little slow, or maybe my computer's slow. But why don't we hop over to Yellowstone?
Yellowstone, yeah, not the television show, but the real estate investment group in Manhattan. They're just secured $200 million to convert offices to residences, and they're going to be doing that with the historic Candler Building in New York. They're going to be making it into a 176 unit residential apartment property, I think. So
very exciting. I know that New York has been doing a lot of office to resi conversions. Still the leftovers of the benefits from the Biden administration promoting that. They put a boatload of money out there for those office to resi conversions. And then New York also has their own housing changes, regulatory changes that came through to promote, more or less like opportunity zones.
Right. So it's very exciting. Very cool building, has a long history. Check it out and watch for this development. It'll definitely, draw some eyes.
Oh yeah.
And some other news, speaking of making a map of things, you're mapping out, I think you and Multifamily Insiders, Eric, are kind of working on mapping out the events in our industry.
Yeah, so Brent Williams and I started chatting. I mean, frankly, it feels like a couple of weeks ago, but we both talked about how there was a deep need and desire for an event calendar. For someone like myself who's always being asked questions. What event should we go to? Is this event worth it for us? The challenge is that Graham from Flamingo used to curate this, and then it went by the wayside. So Brent and I decided to pick up the charge and to provide this free of charge for everyone. So I started fooling around and doing some vibe coding, as the kids are calling it. Creating my own version, and I showed it to Brent, and he showed me his. And we agreed, let's go ahead and just throw it up on Multifamily Insiders and see what happens. So here we are. You can take a look at it on their events page. You can click on it on the top right-hand corner there and scroll through. This is not an interactive picture of it, but please take a look. And if your event is not on there or you see there's one missing, you can click on the button that says Submit Event and give me all the details, and I'll make sure if it does qualify that it gets added.
So do some not qualify? That's a good question.
So Brent, I mean, I was just chatting with Brent about this. We've been talking about things like, does a webinar qualify? How about some of these like smaller meet and greet events? So we're really trying to discern, we want to keep the focus on everything from like association events at the more regional level, all the way up to the national level. The question is, do we end up allowing events from independent suppliers, right? Which are maybe more exclusive. PMS companies typically have their own events, which I would argue are large enough to put on there. Because it's a pretty big deal. We don't want to be exclusive. We want to be inclusive, but we also don't want to have it just be so filled to the brim that you can't go and find what you're looking for, and you can't kind of like toggle and get to the exact event that you want to find. So the goal of this is to help both suppliers and property management companies really discern which events are important to them, and then gather the accurate information.
Yeah. And that's my fault. Well, and I also, as Multifamily Insiders supplies a lot of great webinars, so I can imagine them not wanting to necessarily say, "Hey, go to these other webinars."
Yeah.
I'm gonna call that out. But that is a good, those are good events sometimes. But I think that to your point is, and this might relate to the top of your hat, which is, what if I'm a new person into the space, or I'm starting a new company, or like, you're going to have to know what these things are. So it's like this list, if I'm like a founder and I'm stepping into the space, I'm not going to know necessarily what to do. What do you suggest people do in those cases? Like, who do they talk to? Like, who should they be? How should they be finding out? Obviously, people that have gone to these events, they should be asking questions online, but where are resources like that?
Oh, well, I'll call out my friend Henry Talamontes. I've still been trying to get a hold of him. He and I have been trying to connect. He's similarly trying to go and find out events, which events are worth it. The challenge is it's always up for debate which ones are worth it, right? And there has to be some level of ROI in the event down the line. Sometimes the ROI is met right there at the event. You end up closing a deal. Everything's hunky-dory, right? Someone signs, or they say, hey, send me the paperwork on Monday, right? Mm-hmm. Most of the times it's networking, getting introduced to someone new, and that's the start of a conversation, right? Or maybe you catch up on something that's in the middle of the pipeline, you kind of figure out why it hasn't closed, and then you can move the deal forward. But I would say, in terms of like where you would go for this, you can always ask me. I'm happy to give my opinion on it. But your marketing team should be the ones who are supporting in there. The revenue team,
if they're in the industry, right, and if they're have been built something like that, you're right. But I think, to your point, talking to Eric, talking to people that have gone to these things. I mean, I think that's the biggest thing, is asking, because it is situational, right? It is situational. It's not like every company, every management company, every region everything is right for everybody. Where it makes sense for some management companies in Texas to go to TAA. It may not make sense for every management company in Texas to go to TAA. It might make more sense for them to double down in San Antonio or wherever. So it's talking and learning and
100%.
You know,
and to this point, I've heard of people that have crushed it at Apartmentalize, and I've heard of people that got 0 deals closed from Apartmentalize.
Yeah.
You know, it's completely different. It depends on where's your booth. Or, you know, are you getting the list ahead of time? You know, all sorts of stuff.
And it depends on what marketers hate, which is just the timing of everything. If your particular product or offering or service happens to be the thing that is in the zeitgeist or important, you have some tailwind behind you that's pushing you forward that you have no control over or can't. You know, there's no real KPI to track that. It's hard. It's much harder, but. Well, speaking of we can call out Palooza again, but speaking of conferences, let's have a quick conversation about one. Shall we?
Sure. Yeah, let's do it. Let's bring up the wheel of conferences. Sorry.
The wheel of conferences. I mean, fortune too. I mean, if you land that deal or if you make that connection, it could be. Yeah, I don't know what I want to talk about, so I'm just going to spin, and we'll see.
And I'll blink my eyes to stop it. No,
we'll see what happens.
Spring meeting.
Yes, spring meeting. It's coming up here in a couple weeks.
I was going to say that's like right around the corner
in Chicago. I'll actually be going to that one. I've been to it once or twice before. Have you been? Before, Eric?
I've never been to the spring meeting. Tell us about it, Justin.
Well, I think this is a great thing. It's great to get involved. It's more intimate than like PropTech or annual meeting or anything like that you might have done with NMHC. If you're just starting out in the industry and you don't know as many people, I'd say it's probably not as valuable as some of these other conferences. There's not a whole bunch of engagement where you're reaching out beforehand and like apps and all that stuff. Like there's no booth. You're just going to a meeting. You're listening. There is council sessions, much like some of the NAA stuff. There's like committee sessions. You can sit in, you can actually participate or watch the discussion. I think it's great to be able to, again, it's more niche and it's more focused and there's less people. And that alone strengthens your chances of talking and or running into someone else that you might want to talk to. Whereas when you go to a very large conference, you have to be kind of like a sharpshooter. You have to really know what you're doing and you have to know who you're trying to look for. Whereas this, you do need to know people in the room. Otherwise, it's going to be really hard, but it's pretty valuable. And it gives a state of the affairs. It's very similar to things that the National Apartment Association does. This is National Multi-Housing Council. They have their own agenda, their own opinion, but they do work in unison. A lot of things can be kind of similar. I'm sure they're going to be talking about some of these laws that we were just talking about and how they're advocating in Washington for us, how they can increase money for raising for political action committees to support that. All of those are part and parcel of what this conference is about.
Yeah. If only there was a way to just build more housing.
There's only a way.
If only. Oh, geez.
All right, my friend. Well, that's our show today.
Yeah, that's the show. We did save something, of course, as we do at the end. This was our favorite, right, Justin? Our favorite April Fools.
Our favorite April Fools. And I hope, man, someone should will this into existence, man.
I hope.
Talk to Andy Cohen. Talk to Andy Cohen.
Here we go again.
Oh, she mentioned it all. And I have the receipts, proof, timelines, screenshots.
I can't believe how heated it got. Leases end, but legacies last forever. My team serves fierce management, flawless execution, and no drama. Save it for the TV.
We don't just manage properties, we make them the envy of the neighborhood because fabulous assets deserve fabulous teams.
Ordinary property management? That's cute. In the East, RPM has the golden touch.
Vacancies are so last season. We keep your property booked, beautiful, and bringing in the cash.
Extraordinary properties deserve extraordinary management because basic is for the other guys.
I think it broke the internet.
Yeah, I guess so.